A viewer asked for this specific breakdown, and it is a nightmare most people refuse to look at. They wanted to know what happens when you are trapped in an apartment on the 10th floor during a massive superstorm. The truth is, dramatic bug-out evacuations are a Hollywood myth. When the grid goes down hard, the highways become parking lots of twisted metal. You are trapped in a concrete box. The real enemy is not a raider gang from the movies. The real enemy is heat, zero water pressure, raw sewage backing up into your living room, and the terrifying desperation of your neighbors. Most people look at a high-rise apartment building and see safety in numbers. They see reinforced concrete and modern structural engineering. But that structure is entirely dependent on an invisible life support system. Without the electrical grid, a high-density urban building is just a vertical tomb. It relies on a fragile mechanical inertia that operates at exactly 60 Hz in North America. When a Category 4 storm shears the high-voltage transmission lines, substation transformers experience massive fault currents. That frequency decays, and the entire operational ecosystem collapses in seconds. This is a total black start condition. When power generation drops below load demand, under-frequency load-shedding relays automatically trip. They do this to protect massive turbine generators from catastrophic mechanical shearing. It triggers a localized blackout instantly. But in a superstorm, cascading faults across regional interties result in a massive grid-down nightmare. The system fails via mathematical cascade. It does not fail gracefully. You are looking at a hard collapse, and you have exactly 0 seconds to get ready once those relays trip. The clock on your survival starts immediately. At T-0, the localized booster pumps in your high-rise fail instantly. Municipal water networks rely on gravity head pressure from water towers, which provides about 40 to 80 pounds per square inch in the mains. Mathematically, 1 psi lifts water about 2.3 feet. A standard tower can lift water maybe 10 stories up. If you live any higher than that, your building relies on heavy electric booster pumps that require 3-phase power. The second the grid trips, those pumps go dead. Upper floors lose all water pressure at exactly T plus 1 second. You turn on your faucet and nothing comes out. That sudden silence in the pipes is the sound of system inertia dying. This is the moment most people brush off the danger. They assume the city will fix it by morning. They assume the municipal fail-safes will kick in. But you need to understand the logistics downrange. The supervisory control and data acquisition systems, the digital brains running the automated water networks, immediately transfer to uninterruptible power supplies. They are running on borrowed time right out of the gate, completely blind to the damage outside. Those battery backups are inherently limited. They give the city engineers a tiny window, maybe 2 to 8 hours, before they have to rely on giant diesel generators. But in a massive superstorm, municipal diesel generators fail to start at a staggering 15% rate. They suffer from wet stacking, degraded fuel, and severe mechanical neglect. 4 hours into the storm, the UPS batteries deplete. The generators fail to crank. The city goes completely blind to its own infrastructure. No pumps, no sensors, no automated safety valves. Just thousands of miles of dead municipal pipes. You are sitting in the dark, listening to the wind howl. You look over at your kid sleeping on the couch. You do not prep water for yourself. You prep water so your child does not look at you with cracked lips, asking for a drink you do not have. Hope is not a strategy downrange. Most people guess they have enough food, but the math says otherwise. Go to protocolsurvival.com, calculate your survival score, and enroll in our free Catastrophe Survival 101 course right now. Get the training before you need it. Let the command center do the heavy lifting, while you still have internet access. Back in the hallway, the denial phase sets in. Your neighbours are cracking jokes with their cell phone lights. They think this is just a camping trip in the living room. But by T plus 12 hours, the gravity head depletion becomes critical. As the localised water towers drain without the primary pumps to replenish them, the hydrostatic pressure drops below 20 psi. The system is bleeding out. Without that outward pressure, the structural integrity of the entire city water network is compromised. This is when the unseen threats start moving toward your building. When the positive pressure drops, groundwater intrusion begins seeping into cracked municipal pipes. That groundwater brings biological cross-contamination right into the supply. We are talking about total coliform and E. coli flooding the mains. Even if you have a trickle of water left on a lower floor, it is effectively poison by hour 12. People assume clear water is safe water. They fill their glasses during those final pressure drops and unknowingly ingest pathogens that will destroy their gastrointestinal tract in 48 hours. Getting sick in a grid-down scenario is a death sentence. The first 4 hours dictate the rest of your life. If you spent that time panic buying at a stripped-out grocery store, you already lost. Your standard operating procedure should have kept you locked behind your door, assessing your inventory and staging your defensive tools. The storm outside is just kinetic energy. The real disaster is the mathematical failure of the systems designed to keep you comfortable. As the final drops of clean water leave the pipes, the event phase ends and the lockdown begins. The clock ticks past 24 hours and the grind starts. We are now in Phase 2, the lockdown, day 1 through 14. We need to immediately debunk the biggest prepper cliché out there. Everyone says to fill your bathtub with water when the storm hits. But the actual engineering threat in an apartment is hydrostatic wastewater inversion. When the municipal lift stations fail, sewage seeks the path of least resistance. It follows the basic physics of hydrostatic pressure. If you live on the first, second, or third floor of a multi-dwelling unit, you are sitting at the exact bottom of a massive vertical column of urban wastewater. When the street-level mains gridlock, all the grey water and black water from the floors above you will back up directly into your bathtub and toilets. A 10-story column of water creates roughly 43 psi of pressure at the base. Standard P-traps and toilet wax rings are simply not designed to hold back that kind of force. They will catastrophically fail. They will blow out, flooding your lower-level apartment with biohazardous black water. You are suddenly introducing cholera, dysentery, and highly concentrated ammonia gases right into your secure perimeter. Your bathtub water is now poison. This nightmare becomes a reality around T plus 48 hours. That is when the municipal sewage lift stations exhaust their on-site diesel fuel. Those generators are typically only sized for 24 to 48 hours of continuous runtime. Once those lift stations fail, the hydraulic grade line of raw sewage stops moving forward and simply reverses direction. Gravity takes over. It pushes thousands of gallons of toxic waste back into the residential nodes. You cannot fight this hydraulic force with towels and duct tape. You need a mathematically proven engineered solution. To prevent this catastrophic biohazard flooding, lower floor residents must artificially cap their plumbing nodes before the 48-hour mark. Sandbags placed over shower drains are mathematically useless. The hydrostatic pressure of an 80-pound column of water will simply lift a 40-pound sandbag out of the way. You must deploy mechanical pneumatic test plugs. You remove the toilet entirely, insert a 3 or 4-inch O-ring plumber plug into the flange, and tighten it down hard. It must withstand a back pressure of at least 20 psi to hold back the hydraulic head. This is standard operating procedure for urban structural defense. When you crank that mechanical plug tight, you are establishing a hard seal against the collapse of the city sanitation grid. You are keeping the invisible killers out of your home. You do not want to look your child in the eyes and explain why they are sick because you ignored fluid mechanics. You secure the perimeter, you lock down the drains, and you eliminate the biological vector before it breaches your floorboards. Once the sanitation is capped, you have to manage the atmospheric threats inside the box. With the drains secured, we move to the microclimate. In extreme superstorms, residents instinctively tape or seal their windows for light discipline or to stop the freezing drafts. This introduces a lethal biological clock. You are trading a thermal threat for a respiratory death trap. When you seal a room tightly, you are manipulating oxygen depletion and carbon dioxide accumulation. An average adult at rest exhales roughly 500 litres of CO2 every 24 hours. The ambient baseline of a room is around 400 parts per million. You are changing that chemistry with every breath. In a standard sealed apartment bedroom, 2 adults will add 1,000 litres of CO2 daily. Within 12 hours, the concentration inside that room hits 22,000 parts per million. That is over 2%. At 3%, severe hypercapnia sets in. You experience respiratory acidosis, lethargy, and total cognitive failure. You will literally die of carbon dioxide poisoning long before the oxygen levels drop enough to become lethal. Total sealing of a room without ventilation is mathematically suicidal. You must maintain controlled gas exchange, even if it means losing some heat. If this is a summer superstorm, the thermodynamics shift in the opposite direction. When the HVAC systems fail, apartment ambient temperatures can easily spike to 95 degrees or higher. This brings us to advanced medical supply disruption. Forget the cliché about keeping insulin cold. Consider the physical degradation of life-saving broad-spectrum antibiotics like amoxicillin or doxycycline. Chemical degradation follows Arrhenius kinetics. For every 10 degrees Celsius rise in temperature above the baseline, the degradation rate of organic compounds approximately doubles. The heat is actively destroying your medical stockpile. Liquid suspension antibiotics will stratify and denature within 96 hours at those elevated temperatures, rendering them completely toxic or inert. If your kid gets a bacterial infection on day 5, the medicine you stockpiled might actually harm them. Furthermore, do not rely on standard backup power for medical gear. A standard medical oxygen concentrator requires 400 watts continuously. Over 24 hours, that is nearly 10,000 watt-hours. A standard consumer lithium solar generator will power life support for exactly 5 hours. Without massive solar arrays, medical infrastructure freezes instantly. But the most terrifying physical threat in a grid-down high-rise is fire propagation under null pressure. When the municipal grid is down, urban fire behaviour changes drastically. Without municipal water pressure, the standpipes and sprinkler systems in buildings over 10 stories are absolutely useless once the gravity rooftop tanks are drained. If a fire starts on day 3, there is no automated suppression to stop it. High-rise fires spread vertically via the stack effect. They act like massive chimneys, pulling oxygen rapidly up through the empty elevator shafts and the emergency stairwells. At 600 degrees Celsius, compartment flashover occurs. At 400 degrees, the moisture trapped inside high-strength reinforced concrete actually boils, causing explosive concrete spalling. Fire departments physically cannot suppress fires above the 5th floor without building integrated, functioning diesel fire pumps. A single candle-related fire in an apartment block under grid-down conditions results in unchecked structural conflagration. This is why you never use open flame candles for light during a blackout. You are risking a towering inferno because a desperate neighbour bumped a coffee table in the pitch dark. You rely on chemical glow sticks or LED headlamps exclusively. You must establish a continuous fire watch rotation within your trusted network. You sleep in shifts. Someone is always awake, listening and smelling for smoke. Because if the building catches fire on day 6, the alarm will not sound and the fire trucks are not coming. You are entirely on your own, and you need early warning to evacuate down the concrete stairwells before the stack effect turns them into blast furnaces. Survival is about mitigating these cascading structural failures. Let us dive deep into the logistics of advanced water disinfection during the lockdown. Boiling water is the standard advice, but it requires immense thermal energy. Fuel is finite downrange. You cannot waste butane canisters just to make water safe. Turbid, biologically contaminated municipal water drawn from water heater tanks or toilet upper cisterns must be chemically treated instead. Liquid bleach degrades rapidly, losing 20% of its potency in just 6 months. You need a chemical solution with an indefinite shelf life to guarantee safety. You need calcium hypochlorite, not household bleach. Calcium hypochlorite is commonly sold as pool shock. You must ensure it has a minimum of 68% available chlorine with 0 algicides or other chemical additives. This is a massive force multiplier for your survival kit. To destroy Giardia, E. coli and norovirus in highly turbid water, you need to achieve the CDC required 5 parts per million free chlorine concentration. You cannot just dump raw pool shock into a drinking glass. It is highly corrosive and will burn your throat out. You have to understand chemical titration metrics to make it safe. First, create a stock solution. Dissolve 1 heaping teaspoon, roughly 7 grams, of the pool shock into 2 gallons of water. Stir it in a well-ventilated area. This yields a 500 mg per litre stock solution. This is your master batch. For the titration ratio, add exactly 1 part of this stock solution to 100 parts of raw water. That means adding 10 milliliters of stock solution to 1 liter of drinking water. Allow 30 minutes of contact time. This yields exactly 5 parts per million of safe, clean drinking water for your family. We enter Phase 3, day 15 to 30. The emergence. If this superstorm hit in the dead of winter, the cold has permeated the concrete. You have to survive freezing temperatures in a grid-down apartment without utilising dangerous combustible heaters. We already covered how propane indoors produces lethal CO2. Instead, you must manipulate thermal mass and radiant heat. The physics are simple. The human body outputs about 100 watts of resting radiant thermal energy. You have to capture that output before it dissipates into the freezing air. You need to construct a localized microclimate tent. You build this microclimate tent over a mattress using a layered structural approach to manipulate the heat transfer equation. Your base layer must be a closed-cell foam mattress pad with an R value of at least 2. This halts conductive heat loss straight into the frozen floor. Next is the inner atmospheric layer, a breathable nylon dome. This allows moisture vapor transmission so you do not sweat and induce hypothermia through condensation. Then comes the radiant barrier. You tape a mylar thermal blanket to the outside upper half of the dome to reflect infrared radiation. Mylar reflects up to 90% of thermal infrared radiation back toward the occupants. Finally, you create the insulation envelope by layering standard polyester sleeping bags over the mylar. These should have an R value of 4 to 6. This configuration traps roughly 85 watts of your bodily thermal output. It sustains an internal tent temperature of 65 degrees Fahrenheit, even when ambient apartment temperatures drop to 20 degrees. You use math and physics to keep your family warm while the rest of the building freezes to death in their beds. Next on the logistics dive is metabolic preservation. Surviving 30 days on high-sodium canned soup causes catastrophic diarrhea and osmotic diuresis. It forces your body to use up massive amounts of clean water just to flush the salt out of your kidneys. You require mathematically precise dry weight macronutrients to maintain your basal metabolic rate without straining your water supplies via the renal solute load. An adult male requires around 2,200 calories a day, but the source of those calories determines your water consumption and your long-term operational viability downrange. Knowing these blueprints only helps if you can access them. When the grid goes dark, the cloud goes with it. You need a command center that works offline. I built Protocol Survival to be that system. It is a force multiplier sitting in your pocket. Secure your inventory, track your macros, and access your free Catastrophe Survival 101 training modules now, while you still have a signal. Go to protocolsurvival.com and download the offline backup. Do not wait until the cell towers fail and the screen says no service to realize you are completely blind. The optimal macronutrient ratios for minimal water metabolism are 55% carbohydrates, 25% fats, and 20% proteins. For your daily dry weight provision, you need a carbohydrate matrix. 300 grams of a dry lentil and rice blend provides about 1,000 calories and yields the necessary branched chain amino acids. Then you need a lipid matrix. 50 milliliters, roughly 3 tablespoons, of extra virgin olive oil or clarified butter. Fats are calorically dense at 9 calories per gram, and they require absolute zero water to cook or metabolize in your gut. Now, I know the counter-argument. You might think the National Guard would step in long before day 20. You assume helicopters will drop pallets of water. Let me break down exactly why that fails. Urban rescue relies on clear logistical arteries. When a superstorm hits a high-density city, the streets are buried under feet of shattered glass, downed transmission towers, and flooded vehicles. The commercial diesel refueling logistics are completely frozen by the debris. Military trucks cannot drive through null traffic signalling and gridlocked roads filled with abandoned cars. The cavalry is stuck in the mud. Airborne assets are severely limited by lack of safe landing zones on damaged urban rooftops. Federal emergency management protocols explicitly state that citizens should be prepared to be entirely self-sufficient for up to 14 days in major disasters, and that timeline extends rapidly in a total grid-down scenario. They are busy clearing the highways just to get the staging areas set up. If you outsource your family's safety to a government timeline, you will lose. You are the sole provider. It is entirely up to your SOP to keep the people inside your perimeter alive. This leads directly to macro-behavioral dynamics. Historical data from the Siege of Sarajevo and Hurricane Katrina categorically debunk the Hollywood lone wolf tactical fantasy. In high-density urban zones, survival is a strict function of sociology and scarcity mathematics. While the first 72 hours are marked by disaster normalization and cooperative altruism, day 15 is a brutal resource inflection point. Cellular water reserves have been depleted for weeks. Dehydration triggers massive neurochemical shifts in the human brain. We see elevated cortisol levels and severely lowered prefrontal cortex regulation. The civilized veneer is completely gone. This structural manifestation of panic targets the last remaining resource nodes. Unlocked rooftop municipal water tanks on high-rises become a tragedy of the commons. Without structured rationing and armed oversight, desperate neighbors will storm the rooftop. They will contaminate the gravity tanks using unsterilized buckets, dirty hands, and contaminated containers. They introduce massive pathogen loads directly into the last clean water supply, accelerating a communal die-off. This is what social collapse actually looks like. It is terrified people polluting the only water source left, because they lack the discipline to establish rationing protocols. We enter Phase 4, Day 31 to 100, the long haul. In the absence of a municipal monopoly on force, informal neighbourhood security and labour networks naturally form. But sociology dictates they only scale effectively along the limits of Dunbar's number. Trust completely breaks down in groups larger than 150. Operational security and labour sharing mathematically require small, tight squads of 5 to 15 people. You need this group for hauling buckets of human waste down 15 flights of dark stairs, or maintaining those 24-hour continuous fire watches. Attempting to secure an apartment complex entirely alone for 100 days is mathematically impossible. A single human requires 8 hours of sleep. A 24-hour security watch covering a single apartment hallway requires a minimum of 4 adults working 6-hour shifts. Isolation equals death in this environment. You must form localized hallway alliances. You identify the capable individuals on your floor, establish a mutually beneficial defense pact, and physically lock down the stairwell doors. You become an autonomous structural unit, working together to preserve calories and maintain a hard perimeter against scavengers. But even within a hallway alliance, you must practice total personal operational security. To survive the later stages of a prolonged grid collapse, one must camouflage their operational viability. The engineering objective is to become a grey man at the structural level. You must appear just as hungry and tired as everyone else in the building, while quietly maintaining your caloric baseline behind closed doors. The fastest way to break this camouflage and invite a violent breach is through olfactory vectoring. Scent travels faster than sound in an empty building, and starving people have sharp noses. Cooking meats or aromatic foods creates volatile organic compounds. The human olfactory threshold for cooked meat, specifically pyrazines and mercaptans, is incredibly sensitive. We can detect it in the parts per billion range. If you cook bacon on a butane stove on day 40 of a famine, every starving neighbour within 3 floors will vector onto your exact location. The scent travels through the building's shared HVAC ducting. Even when the ventilation fans are dead, the airborne diffusion of those molecules occurs naturally through ambient air currents. You are ringing a dinner bell for desperate people. The solution is absolute zero signature food prep. You use chemical flameless ration heaters to heat sealed meals ready to eat. These pouches use an exothermic reaction of magnesium, iron, and salt water to boil water instantly. They produce zero light, zero olfactory signature, and zero combustion gases, except for a tiny amount of harmless hydrogen gas that requires minimal venting. You get a hot, high-calorie meal without broadcasting your resources to the entire concrete block. You eat quietly in the dark, preserving your operational security while maintaining the physical energy required to protect your family. During the long haul, micronutrient deficiency becomes a silent killer. Scurvy from vitamin C deficiency and beriberi from thiamine deficiency initiate metabolic decay in as little as 14 to 20 days of extreme stress. By day 40, your gums will bleed and your heart will weaken if you are just eating plain rice. You must stockpile vitamin C and thiamine. You achieve this with 1 chewable multivitamin per day, which requires 0 metabolic water to process, compared to rehydrating dried fruits. You feed your kid this blend, and they survive, because you did the rigorous mathematical planning. The same OPSEC rules apply to light and acoustic discipline. Standard LED flashlights project bright white lumens that bounce off drywall and bleed under door frames. From the street below, a single white flashlight sweeping across a 10th floor window tells every scavenger exactly which apartment still has batteries and supplies. Tactical blackout curtains must completely seal all window frames. But even inside, you must alter your lighting strategy. Instead of sweeping bright white light, Utilize low-lumen red LED headlamps exclusively when moving around your secured perimeter. White light is a beacon. Red light is stealth. Red light is a critical tactical advantage downrange. It does not degrade the rhodopsin in your eyes, which preserves your natural night vision. If someone breaches your front door, you can shut the red light off and instantly fight in the pitch dark, while their eyes are completely unadjusted. Furthermore, red light has a longer wavelength. It scatters less and drastically reduces the light bleed through microcracks in walls and door frames. You operate in the shadows, you eat without a scent, and you observe the chaos outside without ever becoming a participant in it. Day 80 and Day 90 are purely a test of psychological endurance. The physical math is already set. If you deployed your pneumatic plugs, your floor is dry. If you titrated your pool shock, your water is clean. If you mixed your dry lentil rations, your organs are functioning. But the silence is deafening. You hear the sounds of a city tearing itself apart in the distance, the groans of the building as the temperature fluctuates. You will be tempted to leave your apartment to scavenge or seek information. Do not open that door. Hold the perimeter. This is why we focus on the stark realities of physics and scarcity. You are not prepping for the glory of survival. You are prepping so that when the world outside goes completely mad, the world inside your four walls remains calm and ordered. You look at your family, and instead of guilt, you feel the quiet confidence of a plan executed perfectly. You bore the burden of preparation so they would not have to bear the burden of suffering. The math worked because you respected the fluid mechanics, the thermodynamics, and the sociology of the urban environment. Survival in a high-density structure is not about having the most tactical gear. It is about understanding the invisible systems that keep the concrete from becoming a tomb. You master the math, you lock down the vulnerabilities, and you refuse to outsource your family's safety to a fragile mechanical grid. You adapt to the physics of scarcity, and you outlast the chaos by becoming operationally invisible. Because at the end of the day, the grid isn't what keeps the lights on, it's what keeps the monsters out.